All right, I think it's time to start. And as I said, people can always enter later. We won't steal too much of your time. We'll start now. So first of all, I want to thank both Jerry and Dr. Ilja for being here and taking the time, to enlighten you a bit on making a more informed choice in your specialization going forward. And a little bit about us. Well, maybe if you've attended one of our events before, you might have heard this introduction already. But we're O20. We're a student party. We work at the University of Amsterdam. What we do is not only working with our candidates through the council in order to make a policy change when it comes to student housing, job sustainability, but besides that, we organize quite some events. And Project Major, so where you are right now, is one of those events, because we strongly believe that the university could do a better job at helping you as students and me as a student and making a more informed decision on what specialization to pick, because it's maybe one of the most important decisions you actually make at your time at the UVA doing a bachelor's. Now, that's exactly the reason why we invited a student to speak about their experiences being a student of this specialization, and a professional in the field who can tell you more about, okay, what can I do with this? What are my prospects in the job market, and what are maybe the things I can think about, maybe to do extracurricular or whatever, in order to really ensure my place in this world. So without further ado, I would like to give it to Caroline, who is going to host this event. And I want to thank everyone. And if there's any questions to O20 specifically, you can always reach out to me or send an email or follow us on Instagram or whatever. But thank you. And Caroline, it's up to you now.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. My name is Caroline, and I'm in the external committee of O20 and responsible for events related to psychology, such as this one. I've been actually very excited about moderating this event since I'm a third-year psychology student and specializing in brain and cognition. A few practicalities before we begin. We would appreciate if you could turn on your video, because it's always nicer, to look at faces than a black screen. If you have a question, I highly encourage you to ask them after the speaker has finished the presentation. You are going to have enough time to ask them. And to make sure that you don't forget them, you can write them down for yourself. Now about today's structure. We will first have the student speaker, Jerry, talk about the specialization for about 20 to 25 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A where you can ask your questions. Afterwards, there is going to be a 5-minute break, and we will continue with our professional speaker, Dr. Ilja Sligte. We will have a moderated discussion on brain and cognition for about 30 minutes, and afterwards, you guys have 20 minutes to ask your questions. I want to mention that we really want to stick to the schedule, and I will be here to keep an eye on the time. If you have any important question afterwards or during, you can always contact us by email or through our Instagram. Now I would like to welcome Jerry. Thank you so much for taking your time today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I'll start sharing my screen for the presentation. Can everybody hear me well and see my screen? Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I think this is quite a nice thing that O20 tried to achieve with these kind of presentations, because I know for a fact that it's quite hard to choose between the specializations. I will try to give some more insights of the brain and cognition specializations, of my experience and how I perceive the courses and all that kind of stuff. So first, my name is Jerry. A small introduction. I'm 27, born and raised in Amsterdam, still living here. I started my study adventure in the finance and control. Didn't like that actually, so I stopped it at about 1.5 years, and then I decided to do psychology at the UVA. Finished my bachelor there with a specialization of brain and cognition, skipped 1 year of studying to do a full-time board year at the VSBA, so the Study Association of Psychology. And now currently I'm doing my brain and cognition in society masters also at the UVA. And for today, I will try to give some insights in what my motivation was to do brain and cognition, go over some courses, and then basically share my experiences. So for me, as I said, for me, it was quite hard to choose which specialization I wanted. So what I did at first was think about, okay, what do I don't want and what do I don't like about other specializations. So for me, it was quite clear that I didn't want to become a clinical psychologist. So yeah, that was off the table. Organizational psychology, I didn't like that very much. So yeah, that was also off the table. And in the end, I ended up with social psychology and brain and cognition. And then with further information and thinking about the first year, actually, I really like the cognitive psychology part and biological psychology. For now, it's called neuropsychology, I think. And the research part of like the information on the research the knowledge of the research in the specialization, yeah, took my attention as well. And that's why actually I chose brain and cognition. Yeah, I've wrote down exact science. It's a bit, I mean, if you compare it to social psychology, what I didn't like about social psychology is a lot of theories and not really, yeah, first one chapter you read about some theory and then a chapter after you're completely different. So that wasn't what I liked actually. And I think with brain and cognition, it's more how you, it's more exact in the sense of how you, let's say, process visual information in the brain. So it's not that kind of theory based, I think. Yeah, so these are the courses of next year, and I have to say it's slightly different from my year, because I did this specialization in 2018 already. And so it's, I will just go over some courses I know, and I've read some courses are a bit changed, but I think the main parts will be the same. So yeah, for instance, in my year, the bachelor thesis and statistics and all were in the second semester and not in the first. So this is for me quite, it looks a bit weird actually to see it now in the first semester. But yeah, let's go just start with block one. You see methods and statistics. This is a really nice course. Yeah, we had it. It's called Toolbox in our thing, but now Toolbox is in the semester two with some other courses in it. But method and statistics mainly goes over the how to do research, what experimental paradigms you use are mainly used in the brain and cognition field, and you really learn how to use or how to work with data, and it's especially handy for your bachelor thesis when you're doing your own research. So yeah, I quite like that course actually. For the electives, it's also a bit different because I chose music psychology and psychopharmacology, but it's not in the current topics for you guys. So for next year, I saw some kind of sports psychology, and I know a lot of friends of mine did that one and really enjoyed that. And I did what in my second year, I did the introduction to cultural psychology. That one is really interesting as well because they give a really different view of the social psychology, so to say. Our social psychology is really Western based, and then you learn a lot of other cultures and stuff. So that's really interesting for you to choose as well, the cultural psychology, I think. Yeah, the bachelor thesis, I will go over that in a minute because I will discuss my thesis and how I experienced that. For the second semester, you see the perception to consciousness and also the memory, language, and emotion. In my year, it's divided in, I think, 3 or 4 courses. So this is slightly changed as well. But for the perception to consciousness and memory, language, and emotions, these two courses are quite similar, I think. A lot of lectures, a lot of information on how the brain works and how we retrieve information, how, you can compare it with the cognitive psychology and neuropsychology courses of the first year, but then more in depth, I think. For me, the language, people generally don't really like the language course. It's quite different than other courses, I think. For me, personally, I did like it. It was a bit more focused on combining the knowledge of the experiments and the textbook actually. So I really liked it, but I know for a fact that a lot of people didn't like it. Maybe because the test is the exam is quite hard as well, so maybe that's why people didn't like it. Then you have these other two, the introduction to neuroscience. That one was I really enjoyed that one. Yeah, that's a combination of lectures, but also like seminars and labs. So you go to the science park, and first you get this white lab coat, so you feel like a researcher, and you're gonna work with microscopes and see with small slices how the brain is made up of like red brains, and you are actually going to slide in bread of cut in red brains yourself and to put that under the microscope. So some people don't like it. I really thought that was interesting and helpful to give some more clearer view how the brain looks, and because normally you only see it in books, and now you see it under a microscope. So that was really interesting, I think. The lectures are quite hard. There was a lot of new information. So most of the other courses you already encountered some of the knowledge in previous years. I thought the introduction to neuroscience was quite new, and especially the first 3 lectures I think were quite hard, but doable and really interesting. And then you have the toolbox. For me, toolbox was medicine, method, and statistics. So from block 1, but now it's I don't know why it's called toolbox, and with experimental and neuroscientific methods. But there you learn how to an introduction to programming and psychophysiological experimentation. And for the toolbox for the programming, at first I thought it was really I was kind of scared for programming, because you heard a lot of people that they find it difficult. I think it was quite doable actually. And the psychophysiological experimentation, it's also really nice because it's a lot of lab visits. So you go to the UvA building at Routers Island, building L, and then you see all these brain measurements like EEG, fMRI, eye tracking. You also do things with skin conductance and all that kind of stuff. So that is really interesting. It's a quite difficult course, I think, in the sense of the lab visits are really interesting to visit and really fun, but still you need to take notes, because the information they provided is also asked in the test. So that was I didn't quite expect it, so maybe that's why I found it hard, the test, because I didn't take any notes, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a nice lab visit. But in the end, you do have to pay attention and make notes on that. I think that's it for the courses that I can tell you. If you have any more questions, do with the Q&A, and maybe I can provide some more information and more insights on how the course contents look and that kind of stuff. So the specialization and thesis, I don't know how it works now, because it's slightly different in the sense of that it is in semester 1. I think it's really weird that it's in semester 1, but I don't know. I did my bachelor thesis on visual working memory, and then within in autism. So I looked at the age-related decline, and at first I was a bit disappointed that I didn't do any research myself. So they gave me a data set, and they say, so you have to work with this, and this is because it was a clinical group, and you can't do your own research with clinical in the clinical field. And this is because of the brain and cognition and clinical neuropsychology is together for the specialization topics. So there are a lot of research done in the UvA in the brain and cognition field, but also in the clinical neuropsychology. And then you have this list of topics, and they try to give everybody their preferred choices, but sometimes it didn't work. And in my case, it didn't work. So that's why I did some more focused on clinical part. But in the end, they really help you to still focus you on like visual working memory is a part of our field as well. So that was really, it was interesting enough to finish it actually, and also to work with, at first work with a data set that large. I really enjoyed it as well, and really understand how to work with the data, how to, and why use the removal of outliers and all that kind of stuff. And this was why the research and methods course is really nice in the before that you do the thesis, because you learn how to work with the data that you're gonna get in your thesis. Yeah, for the topics, I don't know actually what kind of topics there are for next year. So maybe you can, yeah, Caroline can say that afterwards. I really don't know actually. Yeah, so they asked me if there were some unexpected encounters during my specialization. I found it somewhat weird that a lot of seminars, even if they weren't providing new information, but just to work on your own assignment, you had to be there. So it was, the attendance was mandatory. That I didn't quite like actually, because I was like, okay, if I worked on my own stuff, why can't I do it at home and at my own time? So I don't know if they changed it for now, but that was one thing that I remember that I didn't like actually. And programming, as I said, at first I was really scared because in my second year, I tried a minor in introduction to, in programming at the Science Park, and I stopped in about 3 weeks because I was like, I didn't understand anything what we were doing, and it was really, really theoretical on how programs or programming languages were done. And so I was really scared of programming, and I know a lot of people who choose these specialization are also like afraid of programming. And I can say, don't be afraid, because it's not that hard. You're gonna learn how to write in MATLAB, and it's really focused on how you can use MATLAB and programming to work with data, how to visualize your data. So it's a hard course in the sense of you have a lot of assignments, weekly assignments. So that's the hard part. But to be afraid of that you don't understand, I wouldn't say so. It's really clear, and they give you a lot of help. So don't be afraid if you are doubting yourself in programming. Yeah, so skills I've learned during this specialization. I think the main thing I learned during my specialization was analyzing data and how to work with data and really understand why I did some things, because so especially if I think about the second year, then you have this statistical course, and then we were working with data, but I just followed what like they said I had to do. So I'd do this ANOVA and do this, and I had no idea why I was doing it. And then that was the course for me. And in this specialization, you really understand why you're doing things and why it's important to remove outliers. And I think that's one skill I learned. And the other skill is programming in MATLAB, also because I really enjoy that. I have to say I haven't used it since, so I don't know if I will ever be using it, but that's a skill I learned. And yeah, what I wish I learned during the specialization, I found this one quite hard because it's quite a broad question, I think. For me, I really enjoyed working with EEG data and also with MATLAB. So we programmed some things to make EEG data more visual, and I really, really enjoyed that. So I like EEG. So if you ask me what do I want to wish I had learned during the specialization, is even more knowledge on EEG. Yeah, that's really personal, I think. And the future outlook, well, yeah, I'm currently doing my master, so I'm about to finish it next year, hopefully, and then start making money. That's my future outlook. No, just joking. For me, I'm really interested in the field of neuromarketing, and with the master that I can do I'm doing right now, there's a lot of information provided on that and how to work with these kind of knowledge and yeah, I'm actually trying to find an internship with companies that are specialized in neuromarketing. So that's basically my future outlook. I don't have a clear career path or what I wanted to become or something. I don't know. So that's why I make this stupid joke of make money, because I don't see. Well, I will see. Yeah, final advice for me it was really helpful to make a list of what I did not want. So just write down, okay, I don't like this, I don't like that, and then you narrow down your options, you know. So I think that was a really I would give that as advice to you. And yeah, especially for now what we're doing, get information from former B and C students. I think that's really helpful, because, you know, you can ask your study advisors and all, but the students really give more information on how they experience it, instead of saying what kind of course it is and what yeah, how the year will look like. So I think that's a really nice way to do it. I think I've spoke enough now. This was the end, and if there are any questions, please do ask.
Yes, thank you so much, Jerry, for giving us a great overview of how you experience the specialization brain and cognition. Now, I would like to move on to the Q&A. If you have a question and you would like to ask it directly, you can write your name into the chat function. And once your name is being called, you can unmute yourself or ask. Otherwise, you can simply use the chat function and write your question in there. So to start off, I have a question myself. So brain and cognition is a field, you know, with a lot of different topics: perception, memory, language, as you said yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you find to be the most interesting one, and why?
Oh, that's a hard question, I think. I really enjoyed the memory course as well, of the different types of how we retrieve information and how the information decay is going. And so yeah, that's yeah, maybe also I'm a bit biased because I've used working memory in my thesis, my bachelor project. So I think that's the thing that I know most about, I think I would say. But yeah, I don't think I have one specific topic that I like the most, actually.
Is there one that you dislike the most?
No, not really, actually. I really enjoyed this specialization. So for all the topics were really nice. Yeah, if I know for the other students, I know that people didn't like language that much, and I don't. It's mainly because it's quite different. The course is quite different than compared to all the other courses. So maybe that's why. But it's and also it's not only you learn also how like sentences work and how words and why words are in that particular order and all that kind of stuff. So that is not necessarily psychology. So that's why people were like, okay, why the fuck do we learn how to write a sentence, you know? I mean, that's not psychology at all.
Yeah,
So
that was kind of
why.
my thought as well in the first year when we had to learn that, but it is what it is. Okay, so there's a question from Anna. She's asking, what does neuromarketing consist of?
Neuromarketing consists of is basically using the information of the knowledge about the brain and how we process information and how we perceive information, and use that in business problems. So how can I make it more clear? Just to say, let's say I'm gonna make a new product and I'm not sure if I wanted to make it red or make it green. Then you put people in an fMRI scanner and you present the product in red and product in green, and then you measure the brain activity and you see, all right, this red color gives more like people like it more, and then you choose the red one. That's a really simple explanation of neuromarketing, I think. But maybe Ilja can give more information on that after his.
Well, I can briefly comment on that. Like if you ask people by means of questionnaires, people have to have insight into their own ideas. If they are not able to really be explicit about it, but it's just some kind of gut feeling or something like that, you might be able to pick that up with neuroscience methods. In some sense, well, in some cases, neuromarketing techniques have been shown to be better in predicting future behavior of people instead of just asking them.
Thank you for that. I hope that answered your question, Anna. Another question, did you do any internships during your bachelor or master's?
No, not yet. So I'm currently searching for an internship to finish as for my thesis as well for this master. And during my bachelor, I didn't do any internships. No.
Do you think it's feasible to do one, or is there just way too much workload that you shouldn't really focus on doing an internship?
I think that's a hard question. Maybe for me the writing the thesis wasn't that hard, so I would say if you do it, you can maybe combine it with the thesis, because I know for a fact that like programming and psychophysiological experimentation are, the workload is really high, so I wouldn't say that you can do a internship next to that. I wouldn't do that. But
okay, thank you. So a question relating to your master's. How do you find your master's? Is it very theoretically or project oriented?
Oh, it's really, really project oriented. The first course you get all these different kind of assignments to how to use and how to work. Yeah, basically, we didn't have touched any textbook yet. I think there's a lot of assignments, like write a column for a newspaper, make a YouTube video about some knowledge about or a topic from the brain. So it's really project based only. And for now, I'm actually doing a course from Ilja. It's called Real World Case Studies. And then we presented a problem case from TNO, or Brain Engineers, another company. And then you have to work this case for an actual company. So that's really nice. So it's highly project based.
That sounds really exciting. So it's kind of more you apply the knowledge that you've learned in your bachelor to real life things.
Yeah, it's a mostly applied science and translate the knowledge of the brain and cognition field to the societal problems / business problems.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. Not that we're just studying for the sake of learning all this material.
Yeah, but that was also my first doubt of choosing this specialization, because I thought, okay, maybe if I choose this, the only thing I can do is become a researcher, and I don't want to be a researcher for the next 50 years, So and then my study advisor showed me this master's as well and said, okay, this is really applied science master, and it's really practical. So if you don't like the research part alone, then you can do that master in the end. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I think also that answers another question someone had.
Can I just add one thing to that? I think this is mainly something that is important to know. If you want to become a PhD student, then actually Jerry's master is not the thing to choose. So that's the only thing that it basically prepares you for an exit from academia.
Yeah.
Thank you. So another question is, do you have a favorite memory of the course?
A favorite memory of the course? Or what course?
I'm guessing brain and cognition, the specialization.
A favorite memory? Yeah, I think what was quite what I really enjoyed was the lab seminars at the science park. So working with microscopes and trying to draw seeing how the brain actually looked like instead of the textbook. So that was that's a fun memory, I think.
Yeah, I'm very sad that this year, the third year and the second year, is going to miss out on that, because we're being told. I was really looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know. Sorry.
Yeah. So another question is, would you say that brain and cognition is easier if you had biology, chemistry, physics in high school, or does it not really matter?
Well, for me, it doesn't really matter because I didn't have all these course of biology and physics and stuff. So no, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, so someone who hasn't done those are also fine without it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a question I'm not sure you're able to answer, and it's one that comes in every single talk. Would you say that brain and cognition is more difficult in comparison to other specializations, for example, from your friends' experience who did other specializations?
Yeah, that's quite difficult one. I think the focus of brain and cognition also in the specialization is also quite project based and doing a lot of practical assignments. And if you compare that to maybe social psychology or something, it's more theoretical. I think more reading, more So that's the main difference. So if you like theoretical stuff, maybe this is not your cup of tea. But if you like, I don't know. It's I can't answer that really. No.
Yeah, that's understandable. And then there's a last question because we don't have that much time left. Do you recommend any extracurricular activities if we want to pursue the specialization?
Yeah, during my specialization, I didn't do any extra things. Actually, I've stopped studying in my second year to do this the board year at the VSBA, and I've also worked at a psychological assessment center next to it, but that was because I didn't want to end my bachelor's in 3 years, so that's why I chose that. But during my specialization, I didn't really did extracurricular stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we go into the break, I would like to thank you, Jerry, for making the time today, making these presentations, coming here to talk to us about your experience, what it was like to study brain and cognition. You are more than welcome to stay here for the talk of Ilja, but if you're busy, that is completely understandable. So now we're going to have a 5-minute break, and afterwards welcome Ilja at 4:08. So see you then. Okay, so now that the 5-minute break is over, I would like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Ilja Sligte. Thank you so much for being here today with us. Some of you might remember him from your first year where he was giving us lectures in the course Brain and Cognition, but I will let him tell you a little bit about himself before we dive into the interview. So Ilja, could you tell us a brief overview about your educational background?
Sure, I can. So I basically started studying psychology also at the University of Amsterdam in 2000. So 20 years ago, more or less. Back then, we didn't have like this division between the bachelor and the master system yet. So I was like, Dr. Anders, as we call it in Dutch. So I basically studied for 4 years, and then I immediately went into neuroscience, which was actually quite a new thing at the University of Amsterdam. Most focus was at cognition mainly, and just a few people were using functional MRI and EEG back then. I jumped on the train and basically learned a lot about how the brain works and what you could call the laws of the human mind. So in that sense, I would, if I would study right now, it would be brain and cognition for the bachelor and for the specialization in the master's.
Okay, thank you for that. So just to make sure it is clear for everyone, since there's 2 things on the slides, what are your current occupations?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm having a couple of jobs in that sense. So I'm working most of my time at the University of Amsterdam as an assistant professor. 50% of my time I spend lecturing, 50% of my time I spend doing research. So that's Jerry, who just talked. I'm lecturing him now on real-world case studies in brain and cognition. which is a master's course. I'm also lecturing introduction. It's now introduction in brain and cognition in the first year of psychology, and also in the department of exact sciences, psychobiology. So that's also in the first years. So that's mostly what I'm doing at the university. In my research, I'm mainly focused right now at brain stimulation using TMS, then zapping their brain and putting people in the MRI scanner afterwards. We're now setting up a big project to study interpersonal trust between people, where the person actually receives brain stimulation to a region that has been associated with interpersonal trust. So we want to show a causal link between brain activation in that region and if you trust somebody or not. So that's my university part in that sense. I also set up this company about 8 years ago. Brains First, it's called right now. And basically, just after graduating my PhD thesis, an entrepreneur slash sports psychologist entered my office. And we started talking because he wrote a couple of books studying professional football players at Barcelona and Real Madrid. And he was like, okay, great stories. Everybody tells something different. So we don't know the recipe of what you need in terms of the brain to become an elite football player. So can we somehow take a look into the brain, assess the brain, assess cognition of these players to be able to predict who becomes the new Ronaldo or Messi? So it got a little bit out of hand, if you ask me now. So we can now predict for youth players who's more likely to become an elite football player, which is great. But we've also shown that you can select, say, air traffic controllers. You can select stock traders. And even for the municipal of Rotterdam, we're doing lots of projects where we basically find new jobs for people there. So, well, I think if you study the brain and actually package that into a scalable product, then you can really help the world in that sense. So that's what I do at Brains First. If you want to know more, we can talk more about it. And I obtained my PhD in cognitive neuroscience in 2011.
That's great. Thank you so much for this introduction. So if I understood it right, you kind of managed to combine different fields and put them into one regarding Brains First, right?
Well, in some sense, you could say that I did that, but like to my understanding, if we're studying something like cognition, you can really do that quite accurately. So I'm specifically like at Brains First, we assess the executive functions through a couple of experiments. We call them brain games because they're a bit gamified. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
It's frozen.
Okay.
Oh, no, now it's good. Yeah.
Okay. So that's and we can actually very reliably test working memory capacity, processing speed, mental flexibility, all these things that matter when it comes down to goal-directed behavior, to behavior that you actually need in real life. So in that sense, I'm not using personality tests. I'm not using intelligence tests. So I'm staying quite close to the brain and cognition field in that sense. And all our games have been validated in MRI scanners and using EEG. So in that sense, it's still quite close to what I would say brain and cognition is about.
So it's still very research-based, right?
Well, some parts are research-based, but that's mostly when you want to prove that you can also say provide job advice based on the executive functions. Then you first need to prove that it works. But basically what we, for example, with air traffic control, the Netherlands and Germany have done is like test thousands of job applicants, test hundreds, or I think, well, it's about 80% of the air traffic controllers, create a brain model in that sense, or a cognitive model that best describes what you need to become an air traffic controller. And then you can apply that to all these job applicants and track how far they get along the assessments, which is actually 7 rounds of assessments before you enter a 2-year program. So you truly understand how, well, what cognitive aspects are relevant to become an air traffic controller in that sense. So sure, that is research, but it's research for the company. So we don't publish on things like that. Definitely, of course, if you would do that, then a competitor would steal your ideas and then sell it to our air traffic control company. So that's outside the scope in that sense of the university.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a combination of recruitment, but also brain and cognition, the science behind that.
Yeah, yeah, and you can actually see that they're quite different. People have quite a large difference in terms of executive functions, in terms of how their prefrontal cortex functions. And especially if we're talking about intelligent people, there are quite some differences between intelligent people in how they actually operate. So that makes you more or less suited for one or the other job. And that's actually quite surprising to me. So, for example, if we're talking about lawyers, you typically see if you have an intelligence test as an intake for a company, they underperform like dramatically. So if you're talking about matrix reasoning or pattern recognition, they're terrible at that. Only when it comes to verbal analogies, they're great. So, well, why would you use that specific test then to assess where somebody can enter a law firm or not?
Definitely, that's totally understandable. It has to be something that also reflects what you have to show and offer. So moving on to studying. Time flies by very quickly, and sooner than later, we will be pursuing, hopefully, our master's as well in brain and cognition. How was your transition from bachelor's to master's, and what helped you during that time? So I'm guessing for you, it was bachelor's to PhD, like, since it was different back then.
I think it was an integrated system back then, but we started specializing quite early. So in the second year, start of the second year already. And basically after my first year, I had this impression like, okay, I don't like social psychology, organizational psychology. And the only thing that really resonated was biological psychology or brain and cognition. So I immediately knew this is what I want to do. So I specialized in that, and also in these later years, which actually resemble quite a bit of what the master's program looks like right now. I think after the MRI scanner, at the AMC was operational, we were the first ones to scan there. So that was really awesome, I think. But it was just basically, I would say, love at first sight with the topic.
Okay.
And I think that's also the reason why you should choose for something, not by well, believing this could mean something for you in your professional life. You really need to love the topic, I think.
Yeah, so that was also what my next question was about, like what helped you to decide to pursue this field. So did you just go into the first year and you were like, okay, I don't like social, I don't like work in organizational, brain is what I want to do. But for a lot of students, it's not the case. They, for example, think, okay, brain and cognition is nice, but clinical is also very interesting. Oh, maybe I can combine it with work and organizational. What would be your advice on like making a good decision?
Well, I think the first year of psychology in that sense really gives a good perspective on what you like and what you don't like in that sense. So actually listen to your inner self and see what you like most about that, and then choose a specialization. If we're talking about skills, for example, and that would be more skill-based approach, then in some sense, if you study methods, psychological methods, this is kind of your start qualification as a data scientist. So if you really want to be looking ahead like 5 or 10 years in time, then data science, of course, will be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is one way to enter that. So that's something that is, I think, crucial. If we're talking about brain and cognition, like, and if you would enter, say, the research master program and specialize, then you learn all about these deep neural nets that, for example, Google is using. This is initially an invention that was used by brain scientists in that sense. Yeah. And it's a terrific tool that you can also apply to the machine. So in that sense, if we're talking about AI, for example, a true understanding of AI, actually brain and cognition helps you a great lot. So I would really go with your feeling in that sense. And still, of course, well, brain and cognition is, in addition to, of course, the psychological methods department is going to take you 3 steps further.
Okay, thank you for that. So talking about skills, so what is something you wished you would have learned earlier, activities or skills that you would advise us right now to focus on, which will prepare us when we move towards the master's and work life?
So I can be quite brief on this one, because I think if we're talking about like what skill is important in the future anyway, this is like how you can communicate with your computer. So if you're a good programmer, this opens up lots and lots and lots of opportunities. So in that sense, I cannot stress enough that you should start programming immediately. And even if you look at into these Google programs, for example, that are basically free of charge. If you collect the certificates for that, you can start working for Google straight away. They don't require you to finish university even. So in that sense, this is kind of a democratic revolution that everybody is able to start programming here and now today. So I would definitely recommend that. And I would also recommend to specialize in a free programming language in that sense, because we used to program everything in MATLAB. And if you start working for yourself, then a license is about 2,000 euros a year. So instead, if you use R or Python, you will be much more flexible. So yes, please start programming. And even if you go to Coursera or DataCamp and collect certificates, you can even get job offers where you're still studying.
Okay, that's really good to know, because I've never heard anything like that. I do know programming, you know, we're being told it's the future, but not that it's so significant that you can create your own opportunities by kind of diving more into that. So thank you for telling us this. And when we look for a job, it's kind of hard when you have just a degree brain of cognition. What fields do you think can we go into apart from just research?
Well, I think well, this is actually mostly the reason why I started this master, like quite well, I think 4 years ago or something like that. So we used to have the 2-year research master program, and basically you do everything and go into a PhD program. At least we hope you go into your PhD going into neurensics, going into brain engineers to understand can I somehow tap into the unconscious and see how well a commercial works, or where my product is going to sell better in the future. So that is it's actually quite a broad scope in that sense. So I can see people ending up like in all kinds of different directions. And sure, I can also see that some people start as a data scientist for say what is it called again? Well, it will come to my mind soon, but like just a beauty shop or something like that, right? So they need data scientists as well, or people who think about design. And I think one of the key elements to what social media is using to what really works is to basically push all the buttons of cognitive and social biases. And if you understand more about the shortcuts of the brain, you can actually use these buttons for good, for bad, or to sell your product better. So in that sense, neuromarketing can be quite useful.
So just to sum it up, there's a lot of different fields that we can go into, and the two masters that are offered by UVA, so the one Brain and Cognition Society and the research masters, kind of offer us two different pathways.
Yeah, I think
right?
so. Yeah, and I think that is the most important thing that you have to realize. If you still want to keep your options open to become a PhD, then it is smart to go for a research master program. If you're like, this is not something for me in the future, I want to be in a more dynamic environment, work on shorter projects, and work for, in that sense, real customers. And to relate to what Jerry said, make more money, then you shouldn't go for the research master. You rather spend an additional year like upping your technical skills, I would say, than go into a research master.
So it really depends on your goals, and also I guess also on your personality. Where do you see yourself in, like a more company kind of environment, or in research, like experimenting in that way?
Right. And I think that is the crucial thing. Like, do you see yourself more as a consultant? Do you see yourself more as a researcher? And if you're like a super nerd, you can go in either direction in that sense. And I think basic programming skills in that sense help, because even if you are not going to program it yourself, you can still explain it and know how to think in a computational way. So I think that really comes in handy.
So what I got from this whole, what you're saying, is that programming is kind of what we should really work on and specialize in, and make sure that we know what we're doing, because it can only help us.
Yeah, I really think so, and it can be actually quite fun to do, and this is what I realized when I studied, like all the at the end of my my entire study, I started programming, and then I found out like this is wonderful. Like I could lose myself for weeks or months, and I couldn't do anything compared to what people now in their second or third year can do. So that's well, there's a big difference in my start qualifications in terms of programming versus, well, what is now quite common, I would say.
Yeah, and it's also different, like times, different starting points. So I'm guessing now also the programs are way more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
So now I would like to talk to you about your motivation. So what is something that keeps you motivated to get out of bed every day? What like excites you?
Well, I think the kids basically pull me out of bed every morning, so that's a good motivation to start. But I think what I really like is the dynamic aspect. I'm doing quite some different things. So what I really hate to do is, for example, create, say, 300 exam questions for the first year course, and then next year do it again, and then next year do it again. So I always want to do something new and different in that sense. I'm terrible at finishing projects. So in that sense, if I'm talking about research related things, I always need somebody to pull it to the the, the finish line, because else I won't. Well, like let's not go into detail about my persona here, but that's something I need to kickstart something, start something new, be creative. And also, if I'm talking about, for example, the company that I started, I don't have a management function there. I can be the creative brain, doing keynotes at the Nederlandse Bank, like the National Bank, for example, or train people how to use these insights into brain and cognition. I love to do those things, but to say, like, pick up the phone and sell your product, or how to do pricing right, or well, that's not something that I really like to do. So
it would be more like variation in a more creative direction,
yeah,
right?
I think if it's a lot of different things requiring different thinking styles, that is what I love to do. And the best thing is to have like a completely day without anything planned, so you can just spend it on whatever pet project you like to work on then. So then you can spend, say, 6 hours without doing anything else.
Okay, thank you. So you said yourself you're a teacher at the University of Amsterdam, and teaching involves a lot of interaction between the professor and the students. How are you managing to keep yourself motivated during hard times like we have right now?
I think from my perspective, like I think it's quite hard, right? To blow off some steam after work, or to basically have the well, all the social stuff. At the same time, I can imagine that for in my in my position right now, like I have, well, the kids, I have my job, actually 2 or 3 jobs depending on how you see it. So in terms of security and being busy all the time, that's no problem, but I do miss all the leisure time, I would say. And from the perspective of your side, I would, well, I believe this is truly something different from your side. Like, how, what are the perspectives in the future in terms of, like, what are the job opportunities going to look like in a couple of years time, but also like the plain boredom or the walls closing in, like what am I going to do, right? And so in that sense, and I think Jerry can acknowledge that a bit. So now we're having like this online course only, where normally you would be sitting together working on a project, the client coming in, introducing the case in person, and then okay, you do have online interactions there, and in the final presentation, you basically shake hands, drink a beer, and take the project further. So that these kinds of moments are, well, it's terrible to be sitting watching a screen the entire day, I would say. So well, we need to think about these things and how to make that better, because else we're getting like probably like 30% burnout rate soon. So we shouldn't be going in that direction.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I think almost all students really miss like just having their normal student life, because we're even being told that this is the time of our life, and this time of our life we're spending at home in front of the laptop watching lectures, and not really like missing the interaction between students, teachers, just grabbing a coffee, talking with people. So social interaction is really like, I guess that's the kind of a student identity.
The kids are breaking down the house by now, so I'm sorry if you hear some noises in the background. So but that I think that's the difference. If you already have like family life and in that sense settled, still I want to strangle the kids sometimes, but it's not like some kind of tower of boredom, and well, except for the lack of some relief sometimes to go out to a bar or a restaurant or something like that to meet people. But I can see that this is difficult, and we need to find a way to make this work fair. Like,
Yeah.
vaccine now, please.
Yes, I totally
Yeah.
agree with that. And I think until then, it's important to take care of yourself and really, keep yourself busy once in a while.
Yeah, but I also have seen, like, I'm testing lots of people, and there's like different people differ quite a bit, right? Some people have this kind of laser focus. They can block out the entire environment. They don't care if it's quiet around them because they can focus better. And other people are like, where is all the fuss? I cannot work in this closed off space. So actually, the people that there seems to be a shift in people that are prone to stress now. It's a different group than before. So yeah, and that's quite weird to see, right? So I truly believe that stress and severe amounts of stress really depend on, well, who you are, and where the situation actually is a match or mismatch with what belongs to you in that sense.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that.
What suits you.
I would like to move on to the industry, the field of brain and cognition. So as we've seen in the past decades, it's an ever-changing, developing field. So by something I'm very fascinated is the fact that we can somehow communicate with patients in the vegetative state. That's what I've learned in the recent elective I've taken, consciousness, that this can be done by asking them to respond to questions, by imagining to play tennis if they want to say yes, or by walking through the house if they want to say no, which then leads to different activations in the brain. And I think a few decades before, I believe that scientists could have not imagined that this is something we can do. We can talk to people who don't seem to be show conscious, like conscious awareness. So what is something that we should all keep an eye out for in the field? Is there something you would consider to be the next big thing in brain and cognition?
Great question, of course, but like if we're talking about, say, a Neuralink from Elon Musk, for example, this kind of far-reaching implications if we really integrate man and machine, or woman and machine further. So we can directly communicate through brain waves with the computers around us to become some kind of cyborg. I think this is where the things are moving to. So I have seen brain implants, for example, directly in visual cortex. So people who lost their eyesight can see again. And in that sense, that would be a direct hardware a brain interface. So I can see developments there, and humans always try to use technology to improve. So in that sense, like phone, right? Everybody is looking at their phone the entire time. So actively, Google and Apple have already reprogrammed our user system because we're completely addicted at these phones. Well, most of us are actually. So I think this will go quite a bit further. So I can actually, what I think is that the phone as we know it now will disappear. So contact lenses with, for example, a layout or an overlay on top of it. So you can see it. It's kind of like these Google glasses, but then in a lens form. So our people are not seeing that you're using an additional interface that only you can see at that moment, and also like more integration with say facial features, and then projecting that onto an avatar. So instead of us sitting here in Zoom, soon we'll be sitting in a virtual space, and all the facial expressions you can immediately see there. And this has a true implication on brain and cognition, because this is about embodying, putting, like if we put our mind into a virtual platform, this could work really well if we get it right.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of question about, also comes up with your mind. Can you really do that? And is the person that's sitting there, is it still you, or is it, I don't know, a copy of you?
Right. Yeah. So I think that is one of the major things that we're going to see. I think so. That's basically computer brain integration. And for the rest, yeah, if we're talking about AI, so artificial intelligence, everybody's talking about it. It's not doing anything special yet, if you ask me, because all these difficult divergent problems that humans can solve, machines cannot solve. So that's something that we need to start understanding how these kind of typical creative or problem solving skills that we have relates to what a computer can do. So yeah, and of course, like that's one part of it. So these are the big topics, I would say. Again, we're going to start seeing like better measurements, better brain stimulation abilities. So that's on the part of the more basic neuroscientific level, I would say. But there's still like many challenges to overcome.
So you would definitely say an improvement of what we have now, but also kind of new ideas, what I guess we kind of also see in science fiction movies, like the hologram that you see people sitting there and all that.
Yeah, I think, well, we're almost there. So if we're talking about like really mapping a person in detail, like who are you, and can we somehow recreate you in the machine? This is probably 1,000 years too early. But we're going to see some this integration of technology much more, I think, because like why would you need to grab your phone all the time if you can also project it on a lens, right?
Yeah.
So I think these user interfaces will change dramatically. So how are we? Yeah, is this really related to brain and cognition? Well, in some sense, it is.
Yeah, thank you for answering that question. And now we're slowly coming to the end of the interview. My last question for you is, what is your final advice for us who are currently in their bachelor studies?
Well, I would say follow your heart, or better, follow your brain. If you really like something, pursue it. I think curiosity-driven, that's always important, and have a backup plan in that sense. So develop skills that are in high demand. I think in that sense, studying will be much more fun and much easier if you think it's interesting in that sense, because you don't have to you will put in effort, but it doesn't feel like putting in effort. So that's, I think, a crucial part. And also think about like where you want to be in a couple of years' time. Actually, almost anything is achievable if you also just try, right? So like if you email like this world famous researcher with one line of text, they usually respond quite rapidly. So try, I would say, at least.
Okay, thank you for this great advice and answering all my questions. Now I would like to open the floor for any questions you guys might have. So you could just simply ask them by typing them into the chat function. Okay, there's already quite a few. Let's go with this one. Is neuropsychology a possible direction for brain and cognition?
Sure, that's definitely a possibility. I think in the brain and cognition program, you either specialize in neuropsychology or in brain and cognition. And that's the same directions you go afterwards if we're talking about the master's program. So it branches off in neuropsychology and brain and cognition. If you're more interested in, say, patients or people with brain damage, then neuropsychology is more your cup of tea. If you're more interested in brain mechanisms behind any kind of perceptual, cognitive, and emotional behavior, and also the normal spectrum of the behavior, then I think brain and cognition is more suitable.
So you would split it kind of in normal behavior and abnormal.
More or less. And I think brain and cognition, if you really want to start doing experiments with MRI scanners, EEG, etc., you do see that people in neuropsychology also use these techniques, but it's much less common. So if you really want to go into research and study, say, focus on autism and using all kinds of brain imaging, typically you would go for brain and cognition first as specialization, because then you have the technical skills to go into neuropsychology. And that's what we have seen over the years. Like lots of research master students, for example, with a major in brain and cognition end up in developmental psychology, in clinical psychology, in social psychology, in high demand in that sense, I would say. And especially if we're talking about the University of Amsterdam, if you put in enough effort, I would say anybody can land a PhD position, because I think we're one of the best universities in educating our research master students.
Thank you for answering that question. There is a rather technical question from Bora. She's asking, how would you define a thought?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think, well, if I would tease it apart into its constituents, it would require you to keep information active in working memory. And then you need to somehow manipulate these parts of information. So in that sense, if we're talking about an internal dialogue that you're having with yourself, or reflecting on your own behavior, or if you're, I think these are required things that you need to have. So it needs to jump this kind of conscious threshold to become an active construct in working memory. And then I'm already quite technical, I would say, but having something in working memory is really crucial there. So I think it's not purely working memory, but the contents of a thought will always be represented in working memory.
Thank you for answering that question. There is two by Teresa. Do you think that learning about programming is necessary in all psychology fields, or just in brain and cognition?
I think you have a specific benefit in any field. And if we're talking about, you don't know where you're going to end up after university, then you have better chances of finding a good job, I would say. So generally speaking, it would be good to invest in that anyway, because it also provides some kind of framework on how to approach problems and break them down into simpler problems. So it makes life in that sense, from a programmer perspective, more simple, I would say.
Yeah, and it probably also gives you an advantage over others that have not really specialized, or are not really interested, or have not gone into programming.
No, indeed. And I think in the future, if you really understand like these typical human skills, like these divergent skills, like problem solving skills, critical thinking, and how to relate that to programming skills, then you have the best of the human world and the best of the computer world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And just to add up to the programming, because when I went into brain and cognition, I was very scared, because statistics and methods was really not my thing. So for everyone out there, programming is really not that hard. I was very reluctant, but it's really not that hard once you dive into it. And the lecturers and teachers also really help you to do that. So if that's the only thing that is really stopping you from pursuing your dreams, don't worry,
Mm-hmm.
You will definitely be fine.
No, I think you should never stop those kind of things. It all comes down to, even if it's hard, you just need to put in some effort. And I think in some sense, programming classes can be shitty, good, or excellent. And actually, if you're going to all these online courses nowadays, they provide all the means you need. The things that you don't learn with these online courses is that typically they use very clean data sets, and actually the outside world is damn ugly. So you have to do data cleaning and putting everything together. Something that you could well, I think technically this is called data wrangling. And about 80 to 85% of the programming is about combining data and cleaning it up.
Thank you for talking about that. It's really, just to say it again, it's really not the hardest thing in the world. Another question is, do you think the brain and cognition path would be related in any way with working on in hospitals? She was thinking about speech therapy, for example.
I think that would be more the neuropsychology pathway. Speech therapy, I think there's specialization specifically not related to psychology in the Netherlands, if you are interested in that. But it can be related to the hospital. And if we're talking about working in the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience, for example, which is part of the hospital. Am I free?
A little bit, but we can still hear you.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, my computer is old, so I have to buy a new one. So I think in some sense, yes, it can be related, but at the same time, no, I think it's not really a specialized pathway into the hospital.
So you would advise rather to go for neuropsychology if you want to work in a hospital?
Well, if you're interested in people that like compare normal functioning people with people having some kind of problem related, for example, to the brain damage or developmental disorders, then I would probably advise to go into into neuropsychology. Yes.
Thank you. And then adding up to that, could brain and cognition be combined with clinical psychology, and what would be the job prospects?
I think it's completely feasible to do things like that. Like if I'm talking about, for example, propranolol or something like that, if I remember it correctly, it has been shown to be a very good way to treat, for example, post-traumatic stress. And in the clinical psychology department, this is something that they extensively investigated. Like how can we basically efficiently modify fear by understanding how the brain does it.
Okay, so that you would say that is definitely doable, that you can go, I guess, combine the specializations or just go for brain and cognition and then specialize in your master's for clinical psychology.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to choose a major and a master's anyway.
Yeah.
So that is no problem if you want to do that.
Thank you for that answer. So Amina is asking, I'm very interested in studying metacognition and helping people develop their capacity of it. Do you recommend brain and cognition as a path for this? And could you elaborate on why and how?
Very good question. But I think if you would be interested in studying metacognition from a brain perspective, like how it works, what is it, can we train it, then yes. Then like if we're talking about thinking, reflecting on yourself, these kind of higher order forms of consciousness, I think it's very interesting. It's hard to really get a handle on it right now. Like maybe can Amina clarify the question a bit more? Is it for related to say meditation or mindfulness or?
I'm mostly talking about higher order mental functions and thinking how they can also translate into clinical practice. So right. That's why I'm very torn between clinical psychology and brain and cognition.
Mm-hmm. I think in some sense, if you really want to get down to the mechanisms, how it works, what it is, how you can study it, then a brain and cognition perspective could be useful. But if you're really interested in the application of it, I think brain and cognition is not so useful. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think if we're talking about like how to put that to practice, I would definitely say we don't know how.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
We do know how to study it, though.
Thank you for answering that question. I have a question myself. So on the UVA website of your profile, you state that we can contact you if we would like to do an internship. What are the requirements and how would that look like?
Well, typically I would want to know, what are your writing skills? What are your programming skills? And where do you want to go in life? So mostly because like if you have a specific kind of perspective on I want to pursue a PhD degree, I'm not the one to be doing an internship with. If you have excellent writing skills, excellent programming skills, then it takes me much less time in terms of supervision. So we can stick to the creative, cool parts of doing science, I would say. So that's, I think, the requirements that I usually have. Unless somebody has like an amazing idea that I immediately get enthusiastic about, then all the requirements go overboard.
So does it really matter if you're a bachelor student or master's, or is that open to everyone?
Typically, I would supervise master students because, if we're talking about adequate writing skills are usually present in master students. Depends a bit on so I'm always open for a conversation, I would say, but I'm also quite selective.
Okay, so thank you for answering all the questions from everyone. I believe if you still have questions or specific ones, there's Ilja's email address on the UVA website. You can contact him there. So I would like to conclude today by thanking everyone for attending today. And we hope that this gave you a good opportunity to understand brain and cognition better as a specialization and kind of give you an insight of where can you go in the future, especially for the second year students that have to choose their specialization very soon. I also want to thank the O20 team who has worked very hard day and night to coordinate such a large project and make these events possible. Finally, I would like to thank you, our speakers, Jerry, who had unfortunately to leave, and Ilja. We wish you the best in the future within and outside of brain cognition. And if you guys want to find or share this event with others later, we have recorded it and we will post it on YouTube. So feel free to also follow us on Instagram for up-to-date information. And otherwise, thank you everyone and have a great evening.
Thank you so much.